entertainment, insights. Don't take life too seriously. Welcome to Brainsky Unleashed. My guest today suffered some serious health issues when he was young. Those health issues could have killed him. In the face of death, he boldly decided to live his life, come what may, science be damned. His choice to really live has led him to a remarkable and rewarding career. He lives every single day with passion and a desire to help others. I'm pleased to welcome writer and director Rick Pamplin. Welcome to the program, Rick Pamplin.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on. I just want to come right out of the gate and say that, you know, I've just watched a recent movie that's Movie Money Confidential. You sort of in the movie, you kind of touched on overcoming some of your challenging times. And I kind of want to dig into that a little bit because as I've been doing with my podcast lately, I just kind of see that people have had some real challenges in life. And some of the most successful people are successful because of overcoming those challenges. So can you kind of go into some of what that looks like?
Well, I think that I think life is challenging in many ways. I think life is corrupted and evil people have control of many parts of our world. And I'm concerned about everything. And from the time that I was a young man growing up in Michigan, you know, I cared about the starving children in Bangladesh. And I remember going to my church, to my pastor, and he said, "Oh, you should be out throwing a football and chasing girls. You shouldn't worry about things like that." And I said, "Well, aren't you an agent of Jesus Christ? Aren't you supposed to care about these people?" And so, you know, I've been deeply concerned about a lot of things a lot of my life. I was very ill as a child. I was in the hospital. I was born with some physical defects. Twice, I believe, when I was in the hospital, and I'm talking about from 5 to 15, they came and gave last rites.
Wait,
It was very
what?
difficult. I didn't think I would live to be 18. And I was on a number of prescription drugs. I was in intensive care. I had surgeries. I had a lot of problems. And through a weird series of circumstances, my father left and my mother was committed to a mental facility. And I was sent off to military school because even though I hadn't played sports or I wasn't a particularly interesting or engaging person, I read. I read everything I could get my hands on, which was what we used to do before the internet.
Right.
You know, we'd read books, and you could go to a library and you could check out books and you could read about people and you could be inspired, you know, and you know, there wasn't a Tony Robbins or a JT Fox or people like that at that point, but there was Dale Carnegie. There were, you know, biographies of people that overcame things, and, you know, they were very inspiring. So I was able to get a scholarship. So I went to military school and they sent me off to Indiana. And, you know, military school I was in 10th grade, was a very physically demanding thing. And my mother had sent me with a bunch of letters from doctors. I couldn't play sports. I couldn't jump out of an airplane. I couldn't go play war games and maneuvers. And I had 2 DOP kits. And one of the DOP kits was my toiletries. And the other one was filled with all these prescription drugs that I'd been on my whole life. I mean, I was like a zombie. And I went to military school and I want to do this. I want to fire an M16. I want to climb a rope. I want to grapple off the side of a building. I want to play in war games. I want to play football, basketball, baseball. And this was probably the turning point of my life in 10th grade. I took the DOP kit of pills and I flushed them down the toilet at military school. And I didn't tell anybody. And I took the letters and I think I burned them on my desk, you know, like you'd light a match, you'd burn, you know. I destroyed my past life. And nobody knew me there. And I thought, I'm going to die, but I'm going to die living.
Amen.
It was very important to me. And so my mother, every 90 days, would send a box filled with all these pills. Oh, make sure you take your pills. How are you doing? And I would go to the toilet when no one was around because we had a big communal, bathroom. And I would put all these pills and flush them. And this went on for 2 years. I lost weight. I played football, basketball, baseball. In my junior year, I got my varsity letter at a military school. And I found out that girls liked me.
Hey, no.
And it changed my life. And I became fiercely independent. I then ran away from military school because I didn't want to be there anymore. I wanted to be free. I wanted freedom. And I hitchhiked my idea in 11th grade. I ran away with another student and we hit the road, and we were going to move to California and get in the movie business. And I guess we were about 16 or 17 years old. And we slept in ditches and we hitchhiked and we rode with truckers. And, we got halfway across the country and then we just got exhausted. And so eventually we turned ourselves in and got on a Greyhound bus and came back. And my punishment was I lost all my privileges and I had to go to the horse stalls and I had to shovel, horse manure. But I didn't care because I didn't want to be there anymore. It had served its purpose. And I really wanted to be artistic and free. And while I was there, I had been, I had written some poetry that had been published in the magazine. And I wanted to gravitate towards the arts and filmmaking. And I felt more comfortable in the movies I was watching, which replaced the family I didn't have and the love I didn't have. And I wanted to be part of that. And so that began my long quest. I eventually went to a prep school. I eventually went to University of Michigan, Flint. Michael Moore worked for me. I was the editor of the newspaper. I spent a lot of time with Mike. We were both a couple of kids wanted to, go make movies. Although I think Mike wasn't sure at the time exactly what he wanted to do. He went out to Hollywood and Michael Moore called me and he said, you don't want to come out here. It's all concrete. I said, what do you mean it's all concrete? Well, there's not enough trees. There's not enough, you wouldn't like it. So he came back to Flint. I did the newspaper. I'd also, shortly before that, I'd worked for CBS News. There was a CBS station. And Flint, Michigan, it was Flint, Saginaw, Bay City, Midland, was the 52nd largest media, market in the world. And I worked on the CBS. I talked to Walter Cronkite. I worked with Dan Rather. He came and we did a story. And, I learned to film and edit and shoot film and write copy and, have a deadline. And it was a great experience. And after a year and a half, they fired me because I wasn't really interested. The sales department would tell me how to, well, go do a story on this, and this will help us sell ads. And I'm like, go to hell, I'm a journalist. So they put up with me because I was a really good reporter. And I broke stories that went on the Associated Press. I broke stories that other TV stations picked up across the country. And I had some stuff that was on there used to be a CBS Morning News with Hughes Rudd, which is now the CBS Morning Show. And I had stuff that was on there. And Walter Cronkite, who was this grandfather of journalism, he would call up and in the news director's office, which was next to my desk, the phone would ring. So I go in and pick it up and I go, this is, news directors. This is Walter Cronkite. What's going on up there in Flint, Saginaw, Bay City? And I would sit down in the news director's chair and talk to Walter Cronkite for a half hour when he was the anchor man of the CBS Evening News. And that was the greatest time of CBS because they were actually reporting on news.
Yeah, they stopped doing that.
There wasn't spin. There wasn't propaganda. There wasn't any political correctness. So when we went out to do a story, I went out one time to do a story on welfare. And the cameraman and I went into the welfare office and they announced we were going to take film and every person left, and it was a room of empty chairs because people were getting welfare illegally that shouldn't. So I changed the story. I showed the empty room. I showed all the people in the parking lot running away from the camera. So, I was willing to do, real journalism. They would give me a story and I would go out and I would dig. And there was a sheriff that was campaigning for public office. His wife was running for office. And he had on duty sheriff's deputies out campaigning for his wife. And
Well, that's
well, this is
kosher.
completely wrong. And we had a lot of lakes in Michigan. And so we had sheriff, Marine, people that would be at the lakes in case someone was drowning or they needed help. And he would pull these people off of these potentially life-saving, sheriff's deputies on the county payroll, the taxpayers, to go campaign for his wife. So I aired the story. It was the lead story on Associated Press in Michigan. It made all the Detroit stations. I got a lot of death threats, and but it was journalism, and it was the kind of thing that I was interested in doing. What I wouldn't do is kowtow to the advertising department. And when they started selling gold, they'd come to me and say, "Well, you have to go to this client," or I don't do that. I'm not, no. And so, President Nixon came. He was about to resign, and he came to Saginaw, and Dan Rather was there, and we helped do all the legwork for the CBS Evening News, and I met Dan Rather and got to be involved in it and did some stories, and it was very exciting because we went out and did real journalism, but I had a 16 millimeter CP16 with a mag stripe when we had a microphone, and then I had a little handheld camera, a Bolex that you would do, but it was all on 16 millimeter. There was no video then. So you'd have to shoot the video. Then I had a news car and I have to drive like 100 miles an hour to get back because at 4:30, all of the film went into the bath, the chemical bath. And then at about 5 o'clock, it would come out. And we went live at 6. So you had to look at your film, splice it, cut it, work with an editor, write the copy, do the voiceover, and put your story. And I would have 3 to 6 stories a day, that I would have covered. And then I had to put them on a chalkboard and then, well, which is the most important story? What do we have film on? And a lot of times in TV news, the story that you have film on is the story that gets on, not the most important story. So I would have to run into a recording booth and go, "This is Rick Pamplin, blah, 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 blah." Cut it back, and I would do these little masterpieces. I would put Beatles music on these shows. And one night, I was guest anchoring the 11 o'clock news, and we had a story about Amtrak leaving Flint, Michigan, which was a huge thing because when I went to military school, nobody drove me; they just threw me on a train, and I went on a train, from Michigan to Indiana to go to military school, and I was in love with trains, and I loved the old trains. So I went down and I did a thing about the last thing, and we went on the train and we interviewed people. So I put the Beatles song "Ticket to Ride" as the soundtrack.
I love
And
it.
I said, there's not going to be any more tickets to ride on Amtrak in Flint, Michigan. So the director was this kind of hippie guy who, before the 11 o'clock news, would go stand in the snow outside, and he would smoke a joint and come back and direct high. And he and I would fight all the time. So he heard the thing and he goes, "We're not having Beatles music on the movie. You can't do that." And I went in and I said, "Yes, we can." And I threw him up against the wall, like out of a movie scene. And I said, "I'm in charge. I'm anchoring the 11 o'clock news. That story stays." And it was a little bit like broadcast news, and it was a little bit like network, and it was exhilarating and exciting. But I learned filmmaking. I learned how to tell a story in 3 minutes with footage that I'd either shot or directed. I knew how to write copy to make it work. I even learned how to put music on over the objection of, people at the station. And I learned a great deal. And I eventually did a couple documentaries. I hosted some shows, and that was great training. And I did that for about a year and a half.
I'm
And
I'm gonna
I
I'm gonna stop you
Go
here for a
ahead. Yeah,
second
sure.
because as I'm listening to you, I kind of want to take a step back just a little bit because man, you have fire. Like you have fire. And that does explain a lot. Even in my pre-notes for the interview, I said you have passion. I mean, it's right in my notes. You clearly have a lot of passion, and I wanted to kind of find out where you think that comes from. But then I'm taking notes while we're talking, and I'm like, man, this guy has tremendous fire. You say it started in about 10th grade. Was there anything that you could even distinguish that created that fire that would lead you to the boldness for, I mean, you've literally listed out some incredible things that you did in your life that, I mean, there are people that know about the things that you've done in your life, even just so far that you've listed. There was a spark. What was it?
Well, I think it was a number of things. I think I've always had a deep faith in a God and a Jesus, and I've tried to live by that. Although I've been estranged from the church for long periods of time, mainly because of the pastor who told me to go throw a football and chase girls, don't try to feed starving children. So I've always butted heads with organized religion, and I've been in and out of it. I think the other thing I've noticed, there's a bit of a motif with movie directors, people like Francis Coppola, people I really like, and Jim Cameron, and these are people that I know or have had dealings with. A lot of them grew up very isolated. In the case of Francis, he had a loving family, but he was ill.
Mhm.
And when you're ill as a child, you think you're going to die. If you're really ill, if you're in an oxygen tent, if you have a staph infection, if you can't touch anything unless they burn it, if you're going in and out of, whatever you're going into surgeries, you're in a lot of pain. And it was hospitals are much more sophisticated now. When all this happened to me many, many years ago, it was much more brutal. And children were not, that it wasn't a comforting, it was a survival of the fittest. And so I wanted to live. The reason I did stuff in military is I wanted to live. I wanted to experience life. And this is going to sound trite and self-serving, but I'm still concerned, and I'm doing things today. One of my new films is going to deal with it. I'm still concerned about starving children in Bangladesh and all
Mhm.
over the world. And, George Harrison made this movie, The Concert for Bangladesh, which also changed my life. Movies changed my life. It's a Wonderful Life changed my life. Um, Watching people do good things in movies and understand how life worked gave me that spark. And I kept thinking, there's a world that I'm not in that I want to be in. There's people that I wanted to meet. There's people that, I to me, Hollywood was what I wanted. I wanted to go meet these people. I wanted to be part of this industry. And no one encouraged me ever. And if there's any lesson from our talk today, you don't need encouragement. I will encourage you. I don't know you, whoever's listening, but I'm on your side. Go live your dream.
I agree with that
Go
100%.
forward. And I think this guy that I'm talking to right here, Thomas, will support you. I will support you. And
Completely.
I love to empower people and help people. And I think once I got going in my life, it's kind of like, I know you did a great show with Scott DuPont. We like to help people and we like to help each other. And a lot of people in Hollywood don't like that. And a lot of people in the world don't like that. People used to say, why are you wising up chumps? Or why are you helping people? Don't let other people in the industry.
But
Because,
don't you feel that they're missing the point of life?
oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
if you're so self-servant, then you're missing the whole point of the relationships. I mean, we live basically for relationships, and at least in my opinion. And by not serving others, by not helping others, I mean, all you're doing is just enriching yourself. But what are you taking with you?
Well, exactly. And you're living unfulfilled, which is
Completely.
why the suicide rate and addiction rates are an all-time high. Because people are, you know, there's something missing in their life. It's not about money or fame or power or influence, and I've fallen for some of that. I went to Hollywood. I wasn't a saint. I lived the Hollywood life. I liked women. I liked money. I liked a lot of the things that glitter. But, now I'm older. I've lived through that. And I'm not interested in those things. I'm
So
still interested in the things I was interested in when I was 15, 16, and 17. And here's my message.
go ahead.
If you've lost touch with who you were at 15, 16, and 17, go back and get in touch with that person, because that's who you're supposed to be. The world corrupts you. The world brainwashes you. The world will try to make you what they want you to be, or exploit you, or make money off you. The world tries to buy you for wholesale and sell you for retail. Think
So,
about that.
I mean, I agree with you completely, but I'm going to ask you your opinion. And I mean, I have mine. How do you turn that around? It's one thing to say, go be the person that you were at 15, albeit I probably shouldn't be maybe going to 15, maybe a little bit later, but not too much later. And in some respects, I haven't left that age. But how should someone go about reversing that course and going back to that person that they should be?
Well,
A lot of people can't do it. I don't think that they could find the way.
that's a great question, and you're going to be shocked. I have
Go ahead.
3 quick answers.
I love it.
Number one, you got to develop a skill set. You do not get traction in this world if you do not have a skill set. If you don't have something you can monetize, you're going nowhere. You're going to go work for other people who, as I just said, are going to buy you wholesale and sell you retail, and they're going to make the profits off your work. And it took me a while to figure that out. Number one, develop the skill set. Number two, get experience. I worked on movies as an extra, as an actor. I held the boom, a whole day. I went home at night. I couldn't even lower my arms. I was like this. I've been a production assistant. I've been a location scout. Any job that was offered to me, I took. I didn't care what the money was. I worked on a film with a very famous director with a lot of movie stars, all of them rich. And the pay was $100 a week. I worked 6 days a week, about 18 hours a day. It was $100 a week, and all the food I could steal off the craft services table. But the experience was life-changing. The relationships and the lessons I learned were invaluable. And so this was, again, before the internet, before podcast. You can get this stuff now. I love podcasts. I love the internet. I love Twitter. I love all this stuff, YouTube, all of it. Educate yourself to go along with your skill set. And the third thing, be independent. You must think for yourself. If everybody says to you, take a vaccine for a disease that has a 98.6% cure rate, do you want to take an experimental vaccine because 1.4% of the people are going to die from it who may have challenged? Make that decision. Do not care what anybody says. Investigate it and make that decision. As I've gotten older, the food we eat, the hours we sleep.
You better listen to my last podcast.
If you do what they tell you to do, they own you. You cannot let big anything own you.
I'm gonna turn this around again, because I agree with you 100%. I think that people in society today, especially the youth, and I'm not trying to trash talk the youth, but I do believe that they want to skip number two. I'm like you. I got my start. I busted my butt. I took pay cuts to grow my career, because I knew that if I would do the work, if I put in the effort, something good would happen from that. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I thought I knew what it was going to be. I had no idea. And the blessings that have affected my life, because I was willing to cut my teeth on things and do the dirty work and the not so fun work and the definitely not glamorous work, it makes a difference. But then you said be independent. Man, How can people be independent in this world? Now, again, I have my opinion, and a lot of it comes from just being bold and wanting things bad enough. But if you look at society where we're at, you have Hollywood, you've got big education, you have everything pointing towards live within this box, live within what we tell you. You've got politicians, you've got leaders, you've got everybody saying, do what we say. And it's so hard to break out of that. You've broken out of that. I've broken out of that. You've been doing this a lot longer. You've worked with people who, I mean, listen, the last film you just did, I mean, all star, I mean, big star in his last film, but yet you broke free. How would you recommend people break free to be independent? That's a tough one.
Well, I think you have to stay true to yourself. And there's only one voice that matters, and that's the voice in your head or your heart. And I've been very blessed to been able to know Jim Cameron. And I knew Jim at the beginning of his career, and was involved in a screening at University of Southern California, where I was teaching at the time, of Terminator, and to know his story and to be involved in a couple things. And my movie, I did a movie called Michael Winslow Live, and Jim had directed this $12 million Terminator scene that they used at Universal Studios, which with Michael Winslow had done the effect. So I was able to get a hold of Jim when he was shooting Titanic in Mexico, and he gave me the clip for free. It was unbelievable. I mean, so what happens is you network with very great people, and you find people that can help your career. You find people that later on will come back into your life. And it was interesting. When I went to Hollywood, the first place I went was the Lee Strasberg Institute. And it was all about the method acting and artistry and Stanislavski and the brooding James Dean and Marlon Brando and all of this, and I was kind of taught to be kind of a difficult, surly person. And it was really a disservice to my career. And as my career evolved, I found out that my real personality is more like a John Madden, like, hey, come on, let's put on a movie. And I was a positive person, but I was trying to fit in. I was trying to be like the people at the Strasberg Institute. I was trying to be difficult like Marlon Brando or, James Dean. And you have to be yourself. You have to find who you are. And that evolved over time. I was an actor for a couple of years. I did some big movies, and I was in some scenes with people like Dustin Hoffman, Rod Steiger, all Oscar winners. But I didn't like it. And I just knew I wasn't an actor. I did it for about 2 years. I probably did about 50 projects, either as an extra or what they call under 5, where you have under 5 lines. I did some TV shows. I worked with, some really great people, Buddy Epson and different people, Judd Hirsch, great people. But I realized I want to control it. I want to write it. I want to direct it. I want to make it. So it goes back to the thing I said earlier, experience. If I wouldn't have tried to be an actor for 2 years, then I probably wouldn't be a very good director. But then when Ernest Borgnine shows up, Academy Award winner, on my set and says, all right, what are we doing, kid? And I start directing him, I kind of know what I'm doing enough that he respects me. And, I've worked, like you said, with some really big talent. Michael Winslow was great from Police Academy. Ernest Borgnine, I directed Roseanne Cash and her first and I think only film. And I worked with some really great people. Burt Reynolds, Salma Hayek. Well, Salma was an interview with someone else, but she's in my most recent movie. But Burt Reynolds, and I just recently, for a new movie I'm doing, interviewed Quentin Tarantino, which was really interesting. And Quentin really fits into this whole thing we're talking about. I was doing some research. Here's a guy who's made 9 movies. 8 of them were completely independent. Those 9 movies at North American box office theatrical, $1.5 billion. Oh. All right, but nobody's more independent than Quentin Tarantino. This guy has a vision. He makes his own movies. He doesn't care. And my point is, he fit that mold. I think Jim Cameron fit that mold. Jim drove a truck and delivered textbooks in Orange County. Jim worked for Roger Corman at his special effects studio in Venice, which was a barn. And I think Jim made $100, $125 a week, slept on the floor. You know, when I first met Jim, he had been sleeping on people's couches. I mean, he made a film for about $100,000 and it was okay. And then he created this monster called Terminator. And I think he waited 5 years till he could get the funding and have control. So one time I called up Jim and I said, hey, Jim, I'm teaching screenwriting at the time. I said, I'd love to get a copy of the script for Terminator. So he sends me over a script and it's in like about 8-point font. Yeah. And like, it's all pyro stuff. It's all like special effects and stuff. And I called him up and I said, Jim, I can't even understand what you, he said, that's the point. He said, I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing. So I write it in such a way that no one can tell. Peter Bogdanovich used to do 2 scripts, one to show the money people and then the one he'd make. So, I mean, you have to figure out how to get your skill set at a certain level and then be able to monetize it. Whatever you want to do. It works in it doesn't work just in show business. It works in life. And I've had to take some weird jobs along the way. I've done radio shows. I had 2 radio shows in Los Angeles, one of which I was fired from, the other of which was a hit, and then a bigger station bought me, and then they tried to control what I said on the air. And, you know, I'm just not a big censorship fan. I like free speech. So I've been fired from most of my jobs.
I was just going to ask, what do you normally get fired for?
Free speech.
Okay.
You know, the right.
Just not conforming.
Yeah, I'm not going to listen to people. I don't care.
Yeah.
I have things to say. I don't want people messing with. I'm in the Directors Guild, and all my contracts now I have final cut. On Movie Money Confidential, which has been my new movie that's out now, everybody argued. The executive producer, our beloved friend Scott DuPont, everybody wanted to change things. But I'm in the DGA, so I'm entitled to the first cut, guaranteed. But my contract is I have final cut. So I just said I don't care. And people say, well, I don't like that scene, or I don't like that scene. I don't
Doesn't
like
matter
that
to you. You got that final cut.
I don't care. What do I care?
Yeah.
That we did a screening in Florida, about 400 people showed up. And there's a big backer of mine, big executive producer guy. He's in the movie, the guy with the cowboy hat. And he says, we got to go to lunch. It's really important. I said, well, I'm kind of busy. No, we got to go to lunch. He goes, I will buy whatever that investor put in to make that scene where you sell their product. It ruins the movie. It's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And we went to lunch. My wife, who's also a producer, myself, his wife. He said, I'll write you a check right now. You've got to cut that scene out of the movie. I'll double the money they gave you. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So now the movie comes out. The first guy, as I screen it for a lawyer, very successful lawyer in Hollywood, the top independent filmmaking lawyer there is. He asked if he can screen the movie because one of his clients is in the movie. I said, sure. He calls me up and he goes, I want to sign you as a client. It's a great movie. And he goes, you know what my favorite scene is? That scene where they're selling this product and you're making fun of them. And he said, it's art versus commerce. It's brilliant. So then the critics came out. And this is the highest, best reviews I've ever had. 99% audience approval on Rotten Tomatoes. 80% of certified critics, real critics that love the movie. And there's more that aren't certified, but 80%. So the critics are like, the genius, the brilliance of the movie is he shows you what he's doing to raise the money as he's making the movie. And there's these commercial thing and he makes fun of it. And so it's the most popular scene in the movie, but everybody wanted me to cut it out, including the editor, including the executive producer. And, I was just like, well, no. And now, and critics, that reviews that'll last forever, I'm a genius and it's the best thing in the movie. So, when I was interviewing Burt Reynolds, Burt said, you have to make the movie you want. And you can't let other people tell you what to do. And you have to own it. And that's kind of what I did. And then Scott was really funny because we're making the movie and he goes, well, you know, this is your Hail Mary pass. If this film doesn't work, you're washed up. You're done. You haven't made a movie in 5 years. And I was like, well, okay, maybe, you know, and I said, okay, but when I knew what I wanted, I knew the picture was right. And it was very odd. I found my voice later in life. I used to have a literary agent named Mike Hamelberg. He passed away a couple of years ago. Terrific guy, Beverly Hills. He sold Taxi Driver. He produced a movie with Robert Mitchum and Sidney Pollack called The Yakuza, about the Japanese mafia. Terrific guy. We used to go to lunch, breakfast. We worked on a bunch of projects together. And he was my literary agent. And he said to me, you got to find your voice. He said, stop worrying about all these other filmmakers. Find your voice. You don't care. I don't care how long it takes. So I thought it was ironic that I really feel Movie Money Confidential, and then in the new film I'm actually final cutting now, which is coming out in March, they're pure Rick Pamplin films. They're because even when I worked on other films, I did this movie with Ernest Borgnine. I had 70 crew people. I'm shooting it at Universal Studios. I had 3 or 4 labor unions I had to deal with.
Ugh.
I mean, it was too much. I didn't like it. And what I learned, I like a smaller crew. I like young people. And I love young people. When I put my crew together, only my wife and I and Scott had ever made a movie. Everybody, I think the average age of my crew was 29. And their talent and their energy was unbelievable. And I did something that I want to recommend to everybody. I broke all the rules. I hired inexperienced crew guys. I hired young people. I hired people that would argue with me and we would fight about scenes, which made the film better. And I gave them a percentage of the movie.
Wow.
My camera department, my producers, my sound department, and my composer all get a piece of the action. I was shooting my new movie just recently, and I invited the Palm Beach County Film Commissioner and Deputy Film Commissioner to come up, and they spent a half a day with us. And we went to lunch. And they said, where did you get this crew? These guys are amazing. I've never seen such a crew. And I said, oh, well, I got this one here and that one there. And then, you know, well, what other movies have they made? I said, none. And they're like, oh my God, I've never seen crew people so into what they're doing. I said, well, they're owners. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, they own a piece of the movie. They get back end money and they get a salary, and I take care of them when we're doing the filming. And I just believe in like letting everybody get a piece of it. And so now the film is doing well. They will get money for hopefully the next 20 years off of their work on the film. And I gave them the same deal on the new film.
Has anyone else been doing this? I'm curious. I mean, it's pun intended. Yes. You basically are saying that you flip the script on production. Is anyone else doing this?
Not that I know of.
Wow.
Most people that I know of, and I'm not going to name names, Steven Spielberg, I won't say anybody, but are notorious for not sharing profits or percentages with people. And when I was in Los Angeles, you know, it was very, very hard. And if you got points, you got net points, which don't ever materialize. I mean,
but you're doing it off the gross.
Yeah, I
That's
only
generous.
do gross points. I don't believe in net points are a joke.
That's generous.
So I do it off the gross. And when I start a film, I own 100%. And then it goes to 50% to get financing. And then I start giving away pieces. And I can't, and this one, I think I gave away 30% of my equity to other people. And
but you're happy with the result. I mean, look at the result.
You want to know a secret to life? The less greedy you are, the more money you'll make.
That's biblical.
It's true, though. It's true. Greed is not good. Oliver Stone and Wall Street and Michael Douglas are full of it. Greed is bad. And I'm going to tell you one other thing. The more I help people in my career, the more it comes back to me. And I just, you know, I hear from people almost every day on LinkedIn and Twitter, young filmmakers all over the world. I saw your movie. I love it. Oh, I have some questions. Oh, yeah, let's do a Zoom call. What? Let's do a Zoom call. So I talk to these guys. I give them, you know, 30 minutes or 15 minutes. I love talking to them. I find the young people are just like I was when I was a kid in the hospital. Nobody's giving them a chance. And the rules are unfair and the deck is stacked against them. And I think it's harder today to be a young person almost than any time in our history. And the economic situation is it takes so much money to survive. How in the heck are they ever going to go out and fail? Because you have to fail to be successful.
You
You
have to
have to
fail a
try
lot.
things.
You have to fail a lot to become successful. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people may want to recognize. I think people in your generation and my generation, I think do understand that a lot better. I don't think that the youth generally grasps that. And going back to something that you said just literally a few minutes ago, I mean, what you're basically talking about is it's a biblical principle. It's God's money moves. And I've experienced that in my life. There are times where I would hoard my money and seem to get nowhere, and then there are times where I would give my money away to causes that I believed in, and it was amazing as to how much more money would come in. And so that goes back to that principle of just, God's money moves, and you're using it for a purpose. It's not just for selfishness. And I think that's something that I think the youth really needs to hear and needs to understand. That said, as you know, you can't take care of people unless you can take care of yourself. I mean, how could you possibly do a lot and take care of people if you don't have the resources yourself? And that's another thing that I think a lot of people miss in the equation is, being successful in life and managing your own life.
Absolutely. I've been very well off. I've been broke. I've been homeless. And I've come back a couple times. I've had a couple big setbacks, and I've come back. But the older I get, the less I care about that. Because as you just hit on, there's also this thing called God's favor. Some reason God let me be alive and live a long life. And I feel a real sense of obligation to do something with that.
Which makes
I
sense.
really believe I was destined to not live past 18 or 20. I thought I would die on a sports field at military school because I wasn't supposed to be there. And I broke arms and, fingers and, things, and I got injured. And it was like I was alive. I walked around with my arm in a cast. I'm like, hey, I'm here.
But you were
I'm here.
living. There's a difference
Yeah.
between being alive and living. You were living.
Well, and I think so many people today, and I think this is what the government does. I think so what the media does. They're trying to scare people to death.
Yeah,
They're trying to scare you to death to conform. I mean, we're living in 1984.
we
We
are.
are living in it now. It's here. So to me, you have to oppose it. And I'm not necessarily political either way. I'm an independent. I like freedom. I want as much freedom as I can, and I want as much opportunity for everybody to share. I want everybody to have an opportunity.
You know
So,
that the commercial from Apple Computers, the 1984 commercial, right?
yeah,
The
the black and
sledgehammers
white.
going through
Yes.
the screen. You know what most people don't recognize in that commercial? At no point did the woman that threw the sledgehammer did she ever say, "I'm with this political party,"
Yeah. Yeah.
because that part
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Unfortunately, I think it's in today's society, people really get wrapped up around party, but that's not the part that matters. It's the living that matters.
Right.
You know?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think the thing is to help other people.
Yeah.
And I do every little thing I can do. I mean, I get people that ask me for money every day, and that's a tough one because if I give all my money away, then how do I live? So
Right.
I have to be careful with that. But I have no obsession with money. My obsession was with art. And I think you asked a question earlier, and it sort of alluded to that. I mean, my driving force was to create art so that when I'm gone, there's something I did that I left behind. And I went to this college, very interesting college in Los Angeles, which is Antioch University. I actually got a bachelor's and a master's degree. And they were founded by a gentleman named Horace Mann. And he said, you should be ashamed to die until you've contributed something to humanity.
Wow.
And I gave a graduation speech that went over very well, talking about that motto and about what the man who founded the college was about. So my idea is to leave and to give and to do things that make a better world. That's my thing. Let's all work together, and anything you can do, let's make a better world. When we did the pandemic, I drive a big SUV because it works for production and I like them. And I did have an Escalade. It got way too much attention. I got rid of it. Now I just have a Yukon. It's a little more, anonymous. But we would go around where we live.
I love the fact that you just made that analogy. I mean, come on. It's a little bit smaller, but hey.
People would come up and knock on the window and go, "Where did you get this?" And my wife said, "They sell them. You can buy one." But it was too much it was too ostentatious, or whatever you want to call it. But during the pandemic, we live in Florida, and there are elderly people. Some people don't have automobiles. Some people are housebound. So we would go do food runs, and we would pick up food, and we would go and load up, our SUV and bring food back to our neighbors. And it felt great. It was like, wow, do we need to go to the store today? Does anybody need anything?
It's like giving
they
back.
need their prescriptions.
Yeah.
Call in your prescriptions. We'll go to the store. We'll get them for you. And my wife and I would take an hour or two, sometimes 3 hours, and we would drive around. And then we would come back with our truck loaded. And it was like Christmas, giving these people food, medicine, water, that were housebound or were afraid to go out in the pandemic. A lot of people just sat, they were afraid to go out. And so every little thing you can do benefits you and that person. So that's the thing I find. I get more benefit out of helping people. We have one guy that's in the movie, the guy in the red polo shirt at the end of Movie Money Confidential. And he gets up and he starts talking. He's won all these awards and he wrote these screenplays, but he can't get anything going. And somebody said something at the end, and I kind of mouth off and I say, "This guy will make a movie in this lifetime. He's got the drive. I believe in this guy." Well, I got a tweet from him. He's going to the Sundance Film Festival. He's already made one film, and he's now shooting a second film. And it's all because of coming while we were filming our movie. There's a couple of other films that are being made right now that were inspired by our movie, telling people, go make your movie, raise your money. You don't need anybody's permission. And by the way, for anybody that's listening, moviemoney.com, you can go get a DVD. We're in Walmart, Barnes and Noble, Best Buy. You can go on a streaming site, Amazon, all of the top places, or you can go, if you have a library card, to Hoopla and watch it commercial free, which is a great, great streaming site, by the way. And you can also go to Tubi, Freevee, Docurama for free. You might have to watch a couple commercials, but they do it tastefully. But you can see the movie for free. You can see it anywhere. Just go to moviemoney.com. We've got everything listed there, and you can read a little bit about it. And I'm really happy that around Christmas time and the end of the year, we can offer it for free to people.
And it's worth watching. It was a very good film, actually.
I appreciate that.
And there's actually one scene in there that I don't want to give it away because I think people do need to watch the movie, but it's what you do for kids, and just the sage advice that you offer for kids it's priceless, really. And I didn't expect it. And I mean, that was a bit of the movie, as I go through the trailer and then I watch the movie, and I just didn't expect that. And it was, to me, a beautiful scene.
Yeah. And what was interesting about that? They had just had the Parkland shooting down the street.
Yeah.
Where the kids were. And
I think that was mentioned.
You can see when we're talking, there's sheriff's guys walking with automatic weapons behind us. And you can see in the drone shot, you can see the police cars out front. So the school was on lockdown because of the Parkland shooting. And kids are terrified to go to school. They think they're going to get machine gunned down. So you have to deal with that issue to begin with. Then you have to deal with, what are these kids going through? And the school tried to cancel it. And the school is somehow involved with the Archbishop of Canterbury. And we had to get his permission. And we had to go through so many hoops. But we went to interview these kids and what they're going through. And then I met this teacher. The segment was supposed to be 6 minutes. And this is why I always try to have final cut. Well, I do. I won't make a movie without final cut. But In our script, it was 6 minutes. And then Scott, your friend and mine, you got to interview this film. I don't want to interview this film teacher. No, you got to interview this film teacher. I don't want to interview this film teacher. So we do the segment, and they're supposed to go to their classes. The segment was supposed to be, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We keep going. We keep going. We keep going. And the kids are just electrifying.
They're soaking it in. They're soaking
Oh my God.
it in.
They were terrific. And then, so we go out to interview the teacher, and I just lose it. This woman, Angela, people comment in the reviews, audiences, they love her.
She connects.
Oh my God. And so that segment is the longest segment in the movie. I have Salma Hayek. I have Burt Reynolds. I have all my investors that gave money because they could be on camera.
But it's that
part.
part.
Their segments are getting shorter. The kids are getting longer.
Yeah.
That segment runs 19 minutes. And again, everybody's, that's terrible. You can't have that in there. Nobody cares about these damn kids. Blah, 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 blah. And that's probably the second most popular scene in the movie.
I connected to it. I mean, it was powerful. It had impact. I mean, really, one of the things that I was even going to ask you because of watching this movie was when you're filming. I mean, you're behind the camera, and you obviously have a lot going on in your mind. You're putting everything together. You're doing your job, right? I mean, you're in the zone,
right?
But do you ever just get emotional based on what's in front of you? And you just answered that.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I said to her, I said, "Oh my God, this is probably the most important interview in the movie." We did 60 interviews, and I was very taken. And one of the editors, I won't say who, kept saying, "You've got to cut that out. You can't say that. You can't say that. You can't." I think I said I loved her. I said, "I love you. I love what you're doing."
Actually, I think you did. Yeah.
And he said, "You can't say that." I said, "Why can't I?" "Well, you can't."
But it's natural.
I said, "Well, did you raise the money for the movie?" "No." "Do you have final cut?" "No." It stays in. And you have to fight. And I think it's part of the creative process. If you make a movie and everybody agrees about everything, you probably have a pretty awful movie. So if your editor's arguing, your producer's arguing, your investors are yelling at you, you're probably onto something.
You're probably going to get the best out of it.
And I listened to them on a lot of things. We did a great sequence that on paper was brilliant. We put Scott DuPont in an elevator in a very expensive oceanfront marina condo development in Palm Beach. And he would get on at the top, and he had the elevator ride to pitch them to invest in our movie. And we put Scott in again and again. And people would have their dogs, and their dogs are like nipping at Scott. And people are like, "Ah!" And we tried to make it work. But we actually wanted to film Scott trying to raise money for the film in an elevator. It didn't quite work out. But, so that's why you shoot. We shot 100 hours of footage, and the movie runs 1 hour and 41 minutes.
And can we, I just want to get it on record, because it was Scott that wanted you to interview this person. So do you want to go on record here for our friend Scott and say that he was right?
Well, I'll put it this way. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Oh.
No, I love Scott. We tease each other all the time.
He's a great guy.
He was right. He was right about a lot of things. And that's what a producer should do. A producer should help you find things. And I'm old school. We set out, I had an outline of what I wanted to do. And nothing in the final film matches anything that we did in the whole thing. The whole, Burt, we chased Burt for months. And then the Monday, we shot for 5 weeks. The last week we're shooting on a Friday. Scott's flying back to LA on Saturday. And that's it. We're wrapping. So on Monday, we get a call. Burt Reynolds will do the interview 7:00 on Friday night.
This is Burt Reynolds. You stop what you're doing. I mean, you do
it. And I said, "Okay, great. We'll do it." And they said, "Well, he wants to do it at his school." And I'm like, "Okay, we'll do it at his school." So then they're like, "Well, you have 30 minutes to set up." And I went, no. I'm going to shoot 3 cameras, 2 on sticks, a glider. It's Burt Reynolds. We're not doing a 30-minute setup. And I've got booms and lavs. And so Scott says, they're going to cancel the interview. They're not going to give you the hour setup. Well, I said, I'm not doing it. And sometimes you got to, this is a calculated negotiation. But I wasn't going to have not great footage with Bert. I was going to have great footage. And I knew Bert as a filmmaker. I just knew in my head would say, well, he's right. You know, open the school 30 minutes early for him, let him get in there and set up. So my wife, who was the other producer, is an artist by trade. And she was a production designer. So we go to Bert's school and there's this black banner and it's ugly and it's terrible. So I start tearing down Bert's set. I'm taking down the banner. I'm moving this over here. And this guy comes running up. What are you doing? What are you doing? I said, I'm dressing the set. You can't touch all this. This is Bert. I said, I don't care. I'm a DGA director. Get out of my face. And we redesigned the whole set. And they said, Bert's going to come in. You're done. There'll be no interview. I said, well, I'm not filming him with a black banner over his head that says Burt Reynolds School. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm not doing it. And this is ugly. And I want this painting in. I want this cardboard cut up. And so we put this whole set. So Bert comes in at 7:00 and he's with a cane. He doesn't walk well. Scott's got his arm with him. Scott's walking him in. And he looks around and he says, I like what you've done with the place. So I was like, okay, great. You know, but as a director, you have to take chances and you have to be willing to lose things. And we had a big movie star that was going to do the movie and they canceled. And we still don't know why, but they kind of sent us a nasty letter and said, stop harassing us. We're not going to do your movie. And one day we had 7 people cancel the day before filming. So I had like a whole empty day. I'm like, oh, I've got a crew and I've got to shoot some. And what we found out was people don't like to talk about money. People don't like to talk about raising money. People don't want to share any secrets or knowledge. And what I set out to do, I said, when I made the movie, I said, we're going to be bold. We're going to reveal secrets and we're going to be fearless. And we're going to make a truthful movie. And it took us 100 hours and 60 interviews to get it to where it is, where I think the film will help anybody in any walk of life. And I've gotten so many emails and DMs and messages from people like, I'm not in the movie business, but boy, this film really helped me. American Airlines bought our film, God bless them. And we're on every American Airlines flight, international and national, domestic. And I hear from people all over the world. You know, some guys over in Europe getting on an airplane, he watches our movie. And they're saying, I'm not in your business, but boy, was it inspiring. Boy, did it help me. So the other bottom line, before we run out of time, I like to be inspiring. And I finally got back in touch with the films that I loved when I was a kid. It's a Wonderful Life. Even though my new movie is kind of bittersweet, it's about a sad subject. It's about Burt Reynolds. And it's sad that Burt left, but it's an inspirational film. And I spent a year making it. And the other thing, there's 2 things here. Number one, take your time and do it right. If you don't, when are you going to have time to go back and fix it?
Very true.
Number 2, why not be inspirational? There's enough depressing stuff out there. There's enough negative naysayers to fill up 5 Earths. We don't need any more of that. What we need is somebody to stand up and say, you can do something. You can be something. You can go somewhere. You know, and when I was teaching in Los Angeles, students of mine would go to Tony Robbins and do the firewalking. And one student came in and was so inspired, he told us about it. And he went off and wrote a script that he sold for $1 million. And here's what Tony Robbins told him. The guy was like, I got a wife, I got kids, I got a mortgage, I got car payments, and I have a full-time job. I have no time to write, but I know if I could write a script that would sell. Tony said, all right, here's what you do. This is my student. He says, for 3 months, you do nothing but write. You don't go to work. Have you got enough money to keep your house, pay your bills for 3 months? Will you survive? The guy said, yes, but then I'll be totally broke. Tony said, good. You've got 90 days. I want you to quit your job on Monday. I want you to set up a room in your house where you do nothing but write. And I want you to write the absolute greatest screenplay you can.
He did
And he
it.
said, what if I fail? He said, if you fail, you're not a screenwriter.
Wow.
If you fail, you're not a screenwriter. If you succeed, all your dreams are going to come true. So he came and announced this in the class. Okay, we're all for you. Good luck. Call me if you need any advice. He writes a brilliant screenplay and he sells it for $1 million.
He did it.
In the next 12 months, he sold, I can't remember, it was 6 or 7 scripts, $1 million each. If he wouldn't,
and there's his answer. There's his answer.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Take chances. If you have the talent. If you don't have the talent, then don't go for it. So watch podcasts with people like us. I mean, what can I say?
Yeah,
go for it.
Try and learn, but that's, I mean, take action, right? You're never going to get anywhere in life unless you take some action. Yeah.
Action.
So I know that your time is short, and there's definitely one thing I wanted to ask. All right. You are partners with your wife. Now I am partners with my wife in business, and this is not without discussion, I'm sure. So I got to ask, if you guys disagree, as I know in my relationship and my businesses, we have disagreements, how do you work that one out?
Well, first I want to say one of the greatest joys of my life is working with my wife. I love it, love it, love it. When it comes to directing the film and finalizing the film, I have final say. On everything else, I have no say. Happy wife, happy life. Amen. I haven't seen my wallet in 10 years. She whips out my driver's license if I happen to need it. I think we're together about 22 hours a day, only when she walks the dog and hangs out with the neighbors or goes to lunch with some friend. And I don't mind it. It's a great synergy. If you can work with your spouse and be happy and be creative. She was an artist. We started dating and she said, I don't like movies. I don't get movies. I'm not interested in movies. I was like, okay. So we got married. We went on a cruise to the Caribbean. I think it was like 12 days. We came back. I had 5 offices at Universal. She had an art studio downtown Orlando. And she had artwork that was in, House of Blues and the New York Folk Art Museum. She had done an American flag after 9/11, hand assembled with wood strips that was in the window of the Folk Art Museum in New York. So she was actually a successful artist. And so we came back. I said, I got to go to work. She said, I'm just going to come in the office today. I said, okay, you don't want to go to this? No, I just want to stay together. I just, the buzz of the honeymoon or whatever. Okay. She came in the office. At the end of 5 days, she had fired 10 people, taken over the checkbook, cut the budget. She came to me and she said, this is our money, right? You're wasting a lot of money. And she said, I'm taking over the checkbook. I said, well, what about for 6 months, we paid rent on an art studio in Orlando that she never set foot in. So after 6 months, I said, why are we paying rent on the art studio? She said, you're right. I'm going to call my brother. I'm going to go rent a truck. And we had a garage where we lived. We're going to put it all in the garage. And then slowly but surely, the art studio, the bandsaw, all the heavy equipment eventually was sold or donated or given away. And and then she just came to work for me in the movie. But I think she came to work for me because she loved me and she didn't like people taking advantage of me. And she was an artist. And I said, well, you could be art director and you could start designing things. And then she had a background in finance and she had worked at a big brokerage house. So she knew she was good with numbers, and which I'm not. I'm like I think up stuff. I don't.
That's like me. My wife does it. I'm the business guy. I can go out. I can hunt and gather with the business, but heaven forbid I have to deal with a checkbook. It's awful.
Right, and we've been married for 20 years. My wife got the PGA mark, as you saw in our film, and she's getting it on the next film. And so it was a wonderful thing. And I have to tell you, her mother died right as we were finishing the film. And the PGA sent this wonderful letter to my wife. I'm in the Directors Guild, that my wife could have the PGA mark on the film. And very few women had gotten it at the time. It was a very big honor. and inviting my wife to join the Producers Guild of America, which is, very prestigious. So she just sent a copy to her mother. And we found out that her mother was so proud, she took that letter everywhere and showed it right before she
Wow.
died to all of her friends. And she died. And it was very tragic. She was like about 89 or 90. But a check showed up a couple of days after she died. And we opened it up, and it was from her mother. And her mother wanted to pay the dues and the initiation fee for my wife to join the Producers Guild because she was so proud of her. And that was like the last check she wrote in her life.
Wow. That's beautiful.
So, you know, it means a lot to a lot of people. My wife is an amazing person. She doesn't need movies. She could be an artist, but she brings a great artistic look to my production. And then we talk about art, and we talk about what I want it to look like and what do I want. And so she's very involved in the editing, the post-production, and of course she's on set. And on this last movie, Scott was in LA. She ran the set, which was great on the new movie. So she's come a long way, and she's a production designer, producer. If you can find someone, a partner, a wife, a lover that you really trust, that has your back, it is the greatest working experience. You'll be a better person, and you'll do better work.
Truly, that is absolutely true. All right. Well, is there any projects that you want to mention, or any final thoughts before we end this?
No, I just, if you go to moviemoney.com, you'll see all the places you can go watch the film, Movie Money Confidential. And we'll be announcing a new film that I submitted it to the distributor, and they loved it. We have a release date of March of next year. So that'll be at moviemoney.com as well. We wanted to create a website where people could just go and kind of get updates. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. And if you follow me and you want to send me a question, I try to answer. And I get a lot of stuff. So sometimes it might take, and try to get my attention so I notice it. Don't just say, hi, how are you? Because I get about, 300 of those a day. Also on LinkedIn. I've met some wonderful people on LinkedIn. I'm a huge believer in social media. I'm a huge believer in networking. So do that, and check out his other podcasts, because he's on to something. You got something really good going on here. You got conversations going on here. This is great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, as we talked before the interview really started, I'm very new to this, and I'm learning on every one of these. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. I find you to be incredibly inspirational, and have to learn things like when to turn off my phone. That would make sense. But I find you to be very inspirational. Your movie was fabulous. I can't thank you enough for taking the opportunity to talk to me. And I hope to be able to maybe speak to you again in the future and develop a relationship with you. I think you're an incredible person.
Love to do that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I hope I passed the audition.
I think you did great. All right.
All right, thanks.
You bet.